Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Charity Charge Show. Just a reminder for our audience outside of this podcast and interview series, our other goal is to provide equitable access to financial resources for nonprofits out there in the space. So, if that's something that could help out you and your organization, feel free to reach out to us. Jordan Johnson, thank you for joining us today. He is the COO of the Christian Cultural Center of Atlanta and also an advisory board member of the Veritas Schools. The Christian Cultural Center is a part of a global network of churches doing amazing work out there in Atlanta. Jordan, thank you for joining us. Tell me a little
Praise
bit
it.
more about the work you're doing.
Thank you for having me. I mean, I'm so amazed at what Charity Charge is doing in the nonprofit space, and just this table. This table as a resource to come through is exciting. But we're all really driving effort towards growth with Christian Cultural Center in Atlanta. As you prefaced, we are part of a global church network. We're part of a global church system on the Christian Cultural Center out of Brooklyn, New York. So for those that are familiar and been following along, we get to be part of a much larger story with the Atlanta region and this location coming to fruition late last year. So growth in how we scale from a nonprofit perspective is really our focus right now in this season, and that takes a lot of different effort from different people and different avenues. So I'm excited to get into that and see what we can unfold and really lay into what we've learned and share that with others.
Well, that's really exciting. And you've been there for a little over 1 year. Tell me a little bit more about how it's been since you came on. Has there been a bit of a learning curve as it's kind of ramped up into this as it's been a year? What are the kind of the differences and changes that you've seen?
Sure thing. Well, we came about as part of an acquisition for a Christian Cultural Center, and the year has been for us all about really getting the word and the message out for our change. One thing that takes place in the I think in the church infrastructure, but any nonprofit for that perspective, is you have the same awareness challenges that for profit organizations have as well, of making sure that who you are and what you stand for is clear and is being able to be put out there to be attractive to those that come on and experience with the church in particular, with it being a Christian organization. Some people would call it religious organization, but I definitely want to underscore that it is a Christian based organization. It doesn't absolve the fact that it is still an organization as well. So it's important that over this past year we've tried to be really clear at our message, really clear with our value proposition, and just arming the teams and departments across the organization to be able to tell that story clearly.
Incredible. And something that I want to pull out that you mentioned, that transparency piece. It's so important both for the constituents, of course, of your organization, but also the donor base. Tell me a little bit more about how important it is to have one operational transparency, but then also that clear value for the donors that you're trying to bring in for your organization.
Well, I mean, alignment is key. Even church organization, any nonprofit organization, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of those others. But alignment is a strategy, and I think that sometimes that gets overlooked. I think in a organization that is not for profit, you tend to seek volunteer support. You tend to try to arm as many individuals across departments as you can for, in a lot of scenarios, the most manageable resource and um, you know fiscally responsible way that you can as well. So it just makes alignment all the more important, because if you're working with a really major due diligent way of handling resources and finances, then you want to make sure you're getting the most efficient path and efficient workflows out of your team. That makes alignment really the key strategy in that.
In terms of alignment, in terms of your role within the organization, where do you really see that CEO fit in terms of bringing that operational piece into the church?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. Grayson, the COO is a unique spot. I think for me, I think it's part coach from that perspective. What I love about a COO role, particularly in this space of organizational nonprofit growth, it gives you an opportunity to sort of be a lens across all things. That's something that you have to manage as your own personal, I think, as a COO, health and mental awareness as well, that you don't get overly burned out in that sense. But it's all about cross connecting the interdepartment workflows, making sure that, one thing maybe showing up in how guest services, for instance, within a church perspective, is connected to our worship teams, and how our worship teams is maybe connected to our security teams. As a COO, your job is that cross-functional department connectivity, kind of going back to the point of alignment being a strategy. I'll give an example. A lot of times you show up in a nonprofit space or not-for-profit organization, and so many things have to get done. A lot of people have limited resources, in many cases, even limited funding for that. And I know that's something you guys are working so hard to change. But when that happens, sometimes you end up just in go mode. Like, okay, we've got a great idea, go. Okay, we've got a great idea, go. But where that falls down oftentimes, and you see it less so in the for-profit spaces in those organizations, is you have to think about what do you do next so that the workflow and alignment flows seamlessly.
Something I really do want to dive into as well, as you've mentioned, you've been there for 1 year. Has there been anything in terms of challenges that you've faced and you've overcome with that team? Maybe something in terms of alignment, as you mentioned, how important that is, and keeping your team connected. Any challenges so far?
Sure. I think in a growth stage, which we are coming out of that year mark for a Christian Cultural Center Atlanta, is training and consistency of that training is, I think, is forever going to be a challenge. It really only presents itself larger when you think about the growth of the organization as you go from this to this, figuring out the right ways to train and to give the strategic direction, the mission clarity, ensure that there's a one accord alignment. I keep going back to this, but alignment as a strategy continues to show through. And that's partly about making sure that the brand is operational as well. Like, people say brand and you think about, like, oh, what's the logo and the colors? It's sort of like the improv answer. Like, yes, the logo, yes, the colors, but also how does that message show up in your day to day? How does that message show up in your training, pre-service, during service, and post-service as well? Not to say that those are challenges that we haven't been able to work to overcome. We have, but I think they'll continue to show up as a something to keep managing, keep getting better at as we grow.
100%. I think that speaks to something that's so important within the nonprofit space. Just talent acquisition and retaining good talent is so important. And I think a large tool that nonprofits do have is that alignment, the mission oriented aspect of working in a nonprofit space, and the benefits that come from that. And that's kind of the value prop that you have over a for profit organization that maybe can offer a higher salary.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the value prop is so important because I think a lot of times you get value equated with money. And you have organizations spending millions and millions of dollars in the for-profit space to get their value proposition right. As a guy with a brand strategy background, I definitely get that. But value is also just more than money. Is the experience you give, the message that from our case, that you're bringing forth for, from a Christianity perspective, for salvation, for peace, for just an improvement of life as well. That's value too. And so I think you have to make sure that that is clear, and it is not always from a profit organization
Yeah.
perspective about the monetary gain.
And clearly communicating that too, for sure.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that. And another position that you have is this an advisory board member of the Veritas Schools. Tell me a little bit more about, you have the perspective of both the board and also on the executive side. What is that relationship like? And where do you think they can kind of inform each other as well?
Sure. That is something I'm really grateful to be a part of. The Veritas Schools in Atlanta, and it's in talked a little bit about growth, is opening now in DC and LA as well. So really exciting season for Veritas. Within Atlanta, I think just with them being a pre-college, pre-collegiate school on Saturdays, particularly for preparing, Black students for prestigious universities, colleges and universities, and really having a debate institute, a Harvard Debate Institute layer for that as well. 7 years in a row running as victors. So shout out to the Veritas team. But one thing you have as a board member view is objectivity. I think where you get to be really close and involved with the outcomes, but it gives you an opportunity to take distance when you need to. And what I like about that is, I talked a little bit about what do you do next in scenarios. Well, if we're doing X thing in the classroom and we're promoting and seeking funding in this way, being on the board level allows us to collaborate with the executive team in a sense where we can step back a little bit and see what needs to connect next. Whereas if you were in the day to day in the classroom and leadership, and those people are doing a phenomenal job, but you can focus on one section of the where at the board level it's a little bit easier to step back and see the entirety of the mountain from base to
And
peak.
where are we going?
Yeah, absolutely,
I love
absolutely.
that. If there's one thing that you could lesson that you would take from the executive side to tell board members, and one lesson that you would take from that board member perspective to tell your executive team, what would those be?
I think it's always good to hear ground truth, meaning from the student's perspective in the classroom, those people in the day to day leadership roles within the organization. It's very important that is clear. That experience is clear to the board because that's from an executive team perspective. Then from the board's perspective, the reason why you need that clarity is so that you can connect the journey for those that are involved, the stakeholders. In a lot of sense, the stakeholders in the sense of the parents and the students. So it gives the board clarity. It gives the board real ground truth of what's happening for the student, what's happening for the parents, and you can connect that experience need to where the organization needs to go. Oh,
And, yeah, definitely bringing that experience and that perspective to the board
yeah,
member, so it's keeping the grounded perspective
for
whenever we're
sure.
talking about that high level insight, so important. Yeah, and, I'd love to dive into, I know that you have a lot of conversations with nonprofit leaders in this space, through an organization that you're a founder and CEO of. Tell me a little bit more about that and also, some perspectives of the nonprofits that you're talking to, and maybe some commonalities in terms of maybe some, improvements that can be made within the nonprofit space.
For sure, for sure. I am a founder and CEO of Alfred Nguyen. It's a consulting firm based out of Atlanta that works with growth stage and in private equity acquired organizations as well. And we have a impact arm for Alfred Nguyen that is for every a percentage of all of our net profits for Alfred Nguyen, we actually do give back to the community, give back to impact organizations to drive change as well. It's part of our vision that as we redefine what growth looks like, we want to make doing good in business synonymous with just doing good. So what we typically will see and talk to, growth is such a bread and butter for where we help organizations navigate with the consulting firm. And growth for a nonprofit organization is also in a lot of ways required. And we say it this way, it's the things we've learned about growth is growth is required. But thinking about how you do that strategically where your strategy is not outpaced by the complexity of that growth is really important. Here's what we've seen across the nonprofit space that I would mimic that there is a blueprint in the for-profit organization across departmental structure, across strategy development in terms of like how your organization and operations value chain is created that doesn't have to be redesigned for a nonprofit space. It just has to be retooled for the nuance of your nonprofit sector in that sense where if you've got innovation and strategy department thinking you need that in the nonprofit space as well. And particularly, I like thinking about it from brand and operations as the use case. Those things still are so important to define and refine. It's almost less forgiving in the nonprofit space where your brand showing up one way with organizations that are for profit selling product or services, you have an opportunity to sort of offset some of
Yeah. Yeah. Ma Making a good product as well. Yeah, yeah.
is like, be super clear on the message, be super clear on the value so that, you can manage those impacts of the brand as succinctly as possible.
I love that. Something I'd love to just kind of as a wrap up through this work with your organization, what would you say is some strengths that nonprofits should kind of dig in more on that they can as a differentiator? And then also, what are some areas that you're seeing as a commonality in terms of like maybe some weaknesses in terms of nonprofit structure that is there's some stuff that needs to be improved there.
Yeah, I'd say strengths for sure is I think being clear on the message, from a nonprofit perspective. and a lot of the good that is happening across those organizations, across sectors. The message and the why is where all of the investment is really.
Mm,
Continue to be clear on that, making that show up across multitude of channels. Clearly, is I think the strength to continue to double down on that. I'd say the weakness is just thinking about the brand itself also as the asset and being able to activate that externally in a succinct way. You see so many, really amazing experiences coming out of the for-profit side of things where the external voice, the external speaking on behalf of the organization, it's there, it's high. That same energy, that same external voice, has to be there on the nonprofit space as well, almost more so.
amazing. And that's something that comes out of these conversations so often is that there's these that brand awareness. It could be both your greatest tool and also your greatest weakness with the nonprofit space,
For
especially
sure.
with the relational aspect of nonprofit world.
Absolutely.
I do want to call out you have a beautiful, amazing bookshelf behind you. If you could pick one book that every nonprofit leader behind you should read, what would that be?
Yeah, one book, one book. Wow. No, I'll go into recency with this one and you I will say to everybody's listening to this, Grayson, catch me off guard. I did not intend to reach towards the bookshelf. But the Danny Meyer Setting the Table book is I think is a must read. And it's, Danny Meyer, for those that don't know, a hospitality restaurateur based out of New York and has done just a phenomenal job. His organization is owner of Shake Shack and things like
Okay,
that, just to bring it home for the burger lovers. His book is just a phenomenal navigation around hospitality in the strategy of being hospitable in business. And I think that is a wonderful ingredient, pun intended, I think, wonderful ingredient that we can pull into the nonprofit space, particularly because there's such a higher demand in nonprofit of the I don't want to offend anyone with this. I just want to be transparent. There's such a higher demand for the moral standard in the nonprofit space than there is, I think, for the for profit. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong particularly, but it's just there. And so this book does a great job of meeting that moral standard in the middle with excellent hospitality as a leader for your strategic direction.
I love that, and we had an executive director on a few weeks ago, and she talked to the importance of hospitality within your team at an organization. Because how is a community member, how is a donor going to want to invest in your organization if they're not feeling that hospitality coming at all layers of the organization? And how important just having a friendly smile is in terms of bringing in
Absolutely.
more benefit to the organization.
Absolutely. It's
Great.
part of the experience.
I love that. Well, as we wrap up, anything on the horizon for the Christian Culture Center of Atlanta that y'all are excited for? Any big events coming up?
We're coming up on our 1 year anniversary. For anyone in Atlanta, definitely join us. Look us up on the Instagram, CCC dot Atlanta. And we'd love to see everyone come out thinking about just, those for us as members of our congregation and visitors. We are excited to help everyone that enters our doors feel warm, welcome, and wanted. So we're excited for growth. And it's been a wonderful blessing of a year.
Amazing. And just a reminder for our audience, I hope that y'all gained some valuable lessons from our conversation today. At Charity Charge, our mission is to power yours. And like I said, if there's any help that y'all need in terms of financial resources and tools for your organization, please do reach out. Morning. Thank you for joining us today and sharing more about your, history and path in the nonprofit space. Sounds like y'all are doing amazing work out there in Atlanta, both for the nonprofits that you are directly working with and the ones that you're consulting for. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Grayson. This was amazing. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers.